Welcome to the SicEm365 Baseball Podcast with Levi Caraway. Presented by T&G Chemical and Supply. Let us be your one-stop shop for all of your business supplies at 3328 Franklin Avenue in Waco. Serving Central Texas since 1967.
Welcome in everybody to another episode of the SicEm365 Baseball Podcast. I'm Levi Caraway, and for the second time this year, Baylor went 3-1 this week. So that's a something to cheer about because that hasn't happened very often these past couple of years. And so for this episode, I'll kind of do things a little differently. We'll go through the past 4 games of this week, and then I'll do a midseason review kind of because we're at the halfway mark of the season already, which is kind of crazy to think about, but. First I'd like to thank Mark George and our sponsors at T&G Chemical. Thank you to them for making this official and whatnot. And so we'll kind of start with Thursday night. Baylor opened the week with a 8-3 loss to Cincinnati. Kind of going into the weekend, I thought Cincinnati was a really talented hitting ball club. Their pitching wasn't the best. But then on Thursday night, their pitching staff completely dominated Baylor's lineup. Baylor didn't even really get anything going until toward the end of the game. And Mason Green started on the mound Thursday for Baylor. He pitched okay. He gave up, one bad pitch and it was a 3-run bomb. And, the game was kind of already out of reach before you could even kind of put anything, before the offense could even scratch any runs across and whatnot. And so then, after that game, I was like, here we go. Because, that coming off of that tough loss to UTSA, the late blown lead, coming off those back-to-back blowouts against Texas, I thought there have been a lot of moments this season where I've kind of felt like, this game is kind of can be make or break. Things can really go downhill if they don't turn things around. Kudos to Baylor, kudos to the coaching staff for kind of getting these guys geared up and ready to flip that switch because, the following 2 days on Friday and Saturday, they played really well. And on Friday, they didn't take Thursday's ugly loss into that game. On Friday, they came out, got an 8-6 victory. Mason Marriott wasn't the sharpest he'd looked all season, but he battled and looking at his stats right here, 4 1/3, 8 hits, only 2 earned runs, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, 97 pitches. And I think a difference with him this year that I've really, really noticed with his growth is in the past 2 years, if there's one out, bases loaded, that's going to be an automatic 4 or 5 spot against him. And, this year he's done a really good job of not letting those things kind of mount up. When the bases have been loaded, when he's been in jams, he's normally got out of those situations this year. And, credit to him, man. Like, that's awesome that he's been able to do that. He's been pitching like some of the best guys in Friday, like in the conference. Just really impressive season from him. And then out of the bullpen, Ethan Calder kind of had his worst outing of the year. I believe he threw 2 scoreless, but in that final inning, he gave up 3 hits, gave up a grand slam. His ERA kind of got inflated. His scoreless streak ended, but he's still leading the team in ERA with a 2.28. Still has the lowest whip on the team, 0.93. But yeah, game kind of got close at the end. Turned out to be 8-6, but oh well. Came away with the victory. That's all you can ask for. And then on Saturday, and this series was Thursday, Friday, Saturday because of Easter, so it's flipped when I'm talking about that. And then on Saturday. And then another thing, I guess, as a caveat, was Mason Green pitched on Thursday to kind of keep Marriott and McKinney in their normal routines on Friday and Saturday. And so Saturday, Baylor walked away with the 9-2 dub. Colin McKinney, that was just a masterclass. He's so talented. Redshirt freshman, kind of coming off Tommy John, and you've seen glimpses of how good he can be. And I think Saturday was just like, wow. Retired 14 straight batters at one point, got 10 strikeouts, career high, career long, 6 1/3 innings, only allowed 1 hit, which was like a little bloop single in the left field, and the wind was kind of pushed it back into play. So, basically through 6 no-hit innings, he was incredible. And then out of the bullpen, RJ Ruwe and Drew Leach did a good job. Drew Leach closed out that game. He's been another really good story this season. I think, he was a guy that got cut in the fall of 2022 and came back this past fall to compete for a roster spot, earned a job, and he's done really well this year. Coming out with a feature story on him in a couple of weeks, so that'll be fun. So yeah, just a really good week, and then picked up another series win. Don't look now, but Baylor is 5-7 in conference play, and take away a really ugly series in Houston where they got swept, and they're doing pretty well. They're 5-7 right now. They're kind of toward the lower half of the conference, and I think this is a very down year for the Big 12. I think Baylor will have opportunities in front of itself to make the Big 12 tournament, which is 10 of the 13 schools. And so, yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting moving forward. But, if you win one game in Houston, you're 6-6 right now and you're chilling. I mean, like, who would have thought? I mean, like, I feel like I've said that a couple times this year. Like, who would have thought that Baylor would be 5-7 in Big 12 play right now? But I mean, it's really good. And then they have another winnable series coming up next weekend against BYU. And so, I mean, they might get to above 500. And I feel like multiple times this year, people have kind of thought the sky was falling, and their heads are still above water. And then moving into Tuesday night, Baylor played Houston Christian, who's not very good. They're not your Dallas Baptist. They're not your Sam Houstons of the world. Like, they're not a good midweek opponent. But Baylor's had a lot of midweek struggles this year, and and they were trailing 4-3 going into the bottom of the seventh. And Houston Christian used their Friday night guy in those middle innings, and he kind of shut down Baylor's offense. But then bases loaded, bottom of the seventh, Baylor trailing 4-3, and Danny Altman comes through with a go-ahead triple, bases clearing triple, and they broke that game open toward the end. Ended up winning 13-5, and so, I mean, Houston Christian's not a great team by any means, but I mean, credit to the guys for coming through with that win, because that UTSA lost a blown lead. They got crushed by Sam Houston. They lost to DBU. They lost to Abilene Christian. They haven't been great in midweek games this year, and I don't want to say that kind of got the midweek like monkey off their back in a way, but it was a good win, and I think now they're 3-4 on the season in midweek games. And before I move on, I want to shout out Danny Altman, because he's had a couple clutch hits this season, and so he went 6 for 15 this past week, 2 extra base hits, 7 RBIs. He has a 6-game hitting streak, collected an RBI in 8 of his last 9 games, and this wasn't a guy that wasn't expected to play much going into the year, and he's played left, he's played center, he's played second. I mean, he's been a very, very valuable piece, and in a year where this lineup has really struggled, I don't know where it would be without him. And so credit to him. He's had a great season so far. Hunter Duplansky, he really struggled in March, and he went 8 for 16 this past week with 9 RBIs, 4 extra base hits. And so he's really putting things together. Enzo Apodaca has obviously been Baylor's best player this season. Coach Thompson moved him into the leadoff role on Friday. Since then, Baylor's 3-0. He's gotten on base at least 4 times in 5 different games this year. He got on base, he got on base in 9 of his 15 plate appearances this past week. I mean, that's crazy. Like, that's insane numbers. And so he's really having a good season. And so yeah, I mean, I'll get into the lineup struggles in a minute, but those guys had really good weeks, and pitching's continuing to been really good. And so yeah, Baylor's 3-1 on this past week, currently 11-17, 5-7 in Big 12 play. And I'll kind of get into the midseason review after this brief commercial break from our sponsors at T&G Chemical.
T&G can, and here's why.
To say my wife and I have a lot to clean is an understatement. So we go to T&G Chemical, where the pros know what cleaning solutions to use and give us detailed instructions on exactly how to use them. We never got that kind of advice from any other stores. And the prices at T&G are great. From general household cleaners to odor control solutions for our pets. We go to T&G Chemical and Supply. That's why.
T&G Chemical and Supply. That's why.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. So this week's a little different because it's the halfway mark of the season, so I'll kind of be doing a midseason review of the team, kind of looking at some numbers. And keep in mind that these numbers were before Tuesday's game against Houston Christian, so these were accurate as of Monday. And so I'll start with kind of the offense. I think going into the year, I perceive the coaching staff, the players all kind of thought the lineup was going to be the strength of this team, and then less than a week into the season, they're down 3 major contributors and Jack Little, Hunter Simmons, and Gavin Brzezowski. And so I think from that point on, you've kind of had to reevaluate or kind of, change what your expectations were, because this program and I've said this a million times, this program is just not in a position where you can lose that many guys and just things are just going to be normal. It's just not, that's just not how it is. And so I think from that point on, there have been highs, a few highs, mostly lows with this batting order. And, it kind of is what it is. Coach Thompson's constantly having to rotate guys in and out, just trying to see what will stick. And I think right now, these past couple games, there's been some success, but, they haven't been great. And so in comparison to last year, currently Baylor's 10th in conference in batting average at 261, scored 142 runs, 64 extra base hits. At this point last year, Baylor had a 255 batting average, scored 144 runs, and a little more power with 75 extra base hits. And I think also you have to keep in mind that the schedule has been much more difficult this season. I mean, last year there was like Mercer, Youngstown State, Central Michigan, and they got swept by Mercer, split a series with Youngstown, and then lost Central Michigan. And then this year you're playing, Indiana, who was supposed to be a regional club. They were ranked when they played Baylor, but I mean, they've fallen off in recent weeks, which is kind of weird. Baylor's also played in Shriners. They played Nebraska, Oregon, and Tennessee. All those guys are ranked. Oral Roberts made the College World Series last year, and they haven't been great this year, but still a solid opponent. And so I think they currently have like a top 40 strength of schedule according to D1. And so I think that you kind of have to keep that into play because they're, playing against much better pitching staffs and whatnot. But I think for me, the disappointing thing about the offense has obviously been injuries, but there's also been, older guys underperforming, and there's also been a mix of underclassmen guys who haven't, relished their opportunity. And I don't want to say like they're busts or anything because like they have plenty of time to grow and whatnot. But like Braden Buchanan, Chase Womack have got opportunities this year, and they haven't really, performed over expectations, I guess. Like they haven't, played well enough where Coach Thompson has to keep them in the lineup. And they've had multiple opportunities. Like I said, I'm not going to rule anything because it's so early, but those guys really haven't taken advantage of opportunities. And upperclassmen wise, shortstop Tyreek Kemp and first baseman Mason Greer have really struggled. I mean, both are hitting below 200, and those are guys who kind of have to start right now. I mean, they don't really have options, and at least with Tyreek Kemp, like his glove is starting to has really shown, and I mean that's a positive. But is it worth a guy who's hitting 175? I don't know. I mean, they kind of just have to deal with it right now because they don't have the options. And then obviously Will Pendergrass got hurt a couple weeks ago. He's probably out for the year. Not expecting good news there. I mean, it's not official, but I'm not expecting him to play this season. And so on the positive note, like I mentioned, Enzo Apodaca has been really good. Hunter Duplansky he struggled to start the year, but he's been better. Wesley Jordan has been incredible. I mean, he struggled to start the year as well, but he's leading Baylor in batting average during conference play. He's hitting 385 in Big 12 play. I mean, that's super impressive. Danny Altman's been good. I mean, he doesn't really have any eligibility left, but I do think moving forward, I think, looking on to next year, I think they have a really good core group of outfielders with Ty Johnson, Enzo Apodaca, Wesley Jordan, and then assuming Hunter Simmons uses his medical redshirt, comes back, and then you have Gavin Brzezowski. So that's 5 guys. I mean, and then, I know they were working Brzezowski out at first base like this past spring. So, or is he going to use an offseason to kind of get some work at first base? I think you'd prefer to keep Wesley Jordan at DH. But anyway, those are 5 legit guys, like outfielders that are playable, that are good at this level, that have shown that they can play. And then on the infield, you have Hunter Duplansky, who I would anticipate coming back, and he's a guy. Is he going to play third base? Is he going to play first base? I don't know, but he's been really solid for Baylor. And so I think outside of that, you have a good group of like 6 guys you probably need. And then if Pendergrass comes back, I mean, he's a good D1 player. I mean, he was hitting like 230, I think, before his injury. So I think you would like to get a first baseman in the portal, but he can definitely play. Like whether that's platooning, whether that's he's a corner infielder. I would like to have him back. But anyway, point being, the coaching staff needs to look to add 3 to 4, impact bats this offseason. And I would probably say they all need to be infielders, whether that's a catcher, whether that's a second baseman, shortstop, first baseman, who knows? But they need to add guys in the portal. And then moving on to defense. I mean, the defense was really bad to start the year, but it's been pretty good in recent weeks. I mean, it's not much different from last year. Have a .966 fielding percentage right now. Last year was at .968 at this point. Something that I have noticed, like I feel like at least once every 2 games, Baylor's averaging like an errant pickoff throw a game. Currently, there's 8 errors on the pitching staff. And I think that's probably hurting numbers. And I think Tyreek Kemp being really bad to start the year at shortstop is hurting numbers. But I think in the past month, they've been solid on defense. I think they're good for one, like bad news Bears play like every couple games. And you're just like, what are you doing? Like, what is happening? But, it happens. They're young. I mean, they're getting better on defense. I will say that in comparison to where they were at the beginning. And I think the main positive, as I said ad nauseum this year, is the pitching staff is just much improved. I mean, statistically, All three starters at this point last year had an 8 ERA. The staff as a whole had a 7.41 ERA. They surrendered 300 hits and 190 free passes across 240 innings. It's crazy. This year, they have a 5.75 ERA, 174 free passes across 236 innings. Much better, obviously. I think that's they're not walking as many guys. I mean, they are still handing out probably a few more free passes than you'd like, but it's not anywhere near in comparison to the last 2 years. And so I think for the pitching staff, Mason Marriott has shown that he can be a Friday night guy in this league. You know, he's a junior. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of draft interest. Will he come back? I don't know. Colin McKinney, Mason Green have been really good as your Saturday and Sunday starters. You have RJ Ruwe, Steven Sepulveda, and then you have Ethan Calder, who's a sophomore, but still an underclassman. And then you have Drew Leach. Kobe Andrade's pitched really well too, but I don't anticipate him having any eligibility left. I don't think. He's a senior. Drew Leach has another year. He's been pretty good. So the bullpen, you know, they've had some guys who Coach Thompson has been able to rely on, and that's something to be really encouraged about moving forward. There's a good nucleus of young guys who I think can be really good. The key will be, you know, keeping those young guys at Baylor, because as we saw last year with Colby Branch, freshman All-American, you know, there's going to be suitors. There's going to be people reaching out to them. There's going to be people trying to get in their ears. And so you just have to kind of hold on tight and hope those guys want to stick at Baylor and whatnot. But yeah, I'm not going to, you know, sound off any alarm bells right now, but the pitch staff has been really good. And hopefully they can keep all those guys. And I think that's, you know, while there hasn't been the young nucleus of position player guys that have really performed well that you'd like, I think there's really a good group of young arms who I think Baylor can build around moving forward. And so, yeah, overall, I mean, I think this team has improved than they were last year. I mean, that bar was incredibly low. And if you ask me how much, I don't know. I mean, obviously the injuries have played a major factor into what the lineup could have been this year. But obviously, like I keep mentioning, the pitching staff has been great. And so I think moving forward, you know, Baylor really has a chance. And I guess this will be kind of a segue into this weekend series. They're kind of taking a break from Big 12 play. They have UIW on the schedule this weekend. UIW, not great. I believe they're 15-11, 15-12, something like that. But over these next couple of weeks, Baylor they took care of business against Houston Christian. They have UIW. Then they have a game at DBU, probably a loss. I mean, DBU is insane. I mean, DBU is always good, but they're even better this year. They're ranked top 10 nationally. Incredible team. And then they go at BYU, and they play UTA. And so I think, and then they kind of go back into Big 12 play Kansas and whatnot. But, you know, they really need to take care of business against UIW, against UTA, against BYU. And if they do, I mean, this team can be at 500, which is crazy to think about. They're 11-17 right now. Didn't mention this earlier, but they were at 9-18 at the same point last season at the halfway mark. That was important information, so my bad for forgetting to mention that. But I mean, it's wild to think about. You have a quarter of your roster is injured. I mean, all the highs and the lows, all the tough losses, and they could be sitting at 500 in 2 weeks from now, which is wild to think about, going into a pretty big series against Kansas probably. So anyway, I mean, they're playing better right now. They've won their last 3 games. It'll be interesting to see what they do against UIW, because I mean, I think the main thing that's been disappointing for me this year is every single time I think they're about to turn a corner, they take a setback, or vice versa. Every time I think they're about to, you know, be pronounced dead, they come out with like a shocking win. And I would like more consistency. I don't know what to expect. I mean, on paper, you should go out and sweep UIW, at the very least, win 2 out of the 3. And, you know, I can't say with certainty that's going to happen. I mean, they need to win this series this weekend, you know, continue that climb back, get to 500, you know, take some confidence in going back into Big 12 play and make the tournament comfortably. And I think that's, you know, all you can ask for at this point is, you know, play your best baseball in April and May, make the Big 12 tournament, and then you go from there. And then this offseason, you know, using the portal is going to be very important. Keeping your young, talented guys is going to be very important. And so we'll see what happens. But, you know, I'm looking forward to this weekend. Baylor needs to win 2 out of 3. They need to, at the very least, like I said, need to win 2 out of 3. And, you know, hopefully they can play DBU competitive next week. I'm not really counting on it because that BYU series is Thursday through Saturday. So you're going to have to keep your arms fresh for the weekend. They're probably not going to pitch on Tuesday. So you're going to be playing probably a top 10 offense in the country with some of your inexperienced arms. So that will be an adventure. But anyway, they need to take care of business against UIW this weekend, and I will talk to you guys next week. And as always, if you're not a member of SicEm365 Premium, please do that because we have game threads every day for each Baylor game. I have Walk Off Weekly, which is a recap of each week. I do these podcasts on Thursdays, which I know, like, we don't have there's not a huge Baylor baseball fan base, but I appreciate the people who do listen and whatnot. And then I have recaps, and then I try to do a feature story every week or two. So stay up to date with that, and then all of my insider information and whatnot. And so hope you guys have a good week, and I will talk to you next Thursday or Wednesday, depending on the BYU series. So anyway, y'all have a good week, and thank you to Mark George and our sponsors at TNG Chemical.
TNG can, and here's why.
I gotta say, running a small business can be tough. As a professional, keeping my place clean for employees and customers can feel like a full-time job. That's why I trust the pros at TNG Chemical and Supply for all my supplies. And now my business stays clean, and I'm surprised how much less I'm spending each month on cleaning and maintenance. Now I can even save on products from TNG Chemical for my home. TNG Chemical and Supply. That's why.
TNG